Happy Valentine's Day. You know what you can get me for Valentine's? Subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, help me hit 500 subs by August 4th. Please. I am your grumpy guide to all things gaming. It is February 14th. It is 9 o'clock. It is Sunday. It is time for another episode of Let's Build an Adventure. And this month we are exploring the idea of the Westmarch Hexcrawl. And one thing I forgot to mention in last week's about the city, because the city is very important to the whole Hexcrawl Westmarch thing, is that a Westmarch Hexcrawl campaign is sort of built around the idea that at the end of every game, somehow the player characters find themselves safely back in the city. And there should always be a few minutes of every game for them to do whatever it is they need to do with the city. Restock, resupply, exchange characters, sell shit, whatever. But you don't want the city to be so interesting that they spend the entire session in there. The city is not what the Westmarch Hexcrawl is about. It's about everything outside the city. So you want to have that balance that every game starts in the city, every game ends in the city. Whatever motivation they need will maybe be provided by the city. Any information they need, they can get from the city. Any supplies they need, they can get from the city. If they need to sell stuff off, they can sell it to the city. And as they progress in levels, assuming they don't kill the people in the city, the information and equipment available to them from the city will somehow mysteriously also increase, therefore being worth it. I mean, do we want to have a shop that sells magic items when there's just, magic items literally growing on trees outside of the city? Probably not. Maybe, the basic necessities, potions, scrolls, but you don't want the city to be their supply of major adventuring crap, because that's part of the motivation to get them to go out of the city is treasure and stuff and rewards. So the city is safe. Somehow the adventure always starts in the city. Somehow the adventure always ends in the city. But the city is not so interesting that they want to spend the entire session in the city. So there should be nothing for them to do in the city. So boredom should be one of the reasons why they wouldn't leave the city. The constant, NPCs asking them to do things, rumors, stuff like that. The rewards for leaving the city. Hey, if you go to the Temple of the Dagger King and retrieve me, the writings of the Dagger King, I will reward you with X. So, yes. And when you come back to this, now, there doesn't have to be an actual logical explanation for how they got back to the city at the end of every adventure. Just, you kind of want them to end every adventure back in the city. Whether it's just they run away at the last second, or magic. I mean, obviously, if they're like in the third level of a dungeon and they're trapped, you could wibbly wobbly them back in the city, but yeah, that's sort of difficult. But in most cases, city is safe, city is boring, city is not meant to spend a lot of time in. This is not a city-based campaign. Whatever. And the city should be either in the center of our Westmarch or on the edge of our Westmarch. So, if all this is the Hexcrawl, the city's here. Or if all this, the Hexcrawl, then the city is here. The city is the farthest you can get from wherever. It's Tatooine. It's if there's a center of the world, this city is the farthest from it. Why is this city there? It's the end of the trade route. It's the farthest the empire has spread. It's the last remains of something that used to be bigger, which is part of the reason why there's all these ruins. Whatever. A new section of land has been discovered, and that's why that city is there, because it was built to be the gateway to the new city. I like the one in Kingmaker from Paizo. Kingmaker says, well, there was a war. The war is over. The winning kingdom won this huge stretch of land, because that's what they were fighting over. Now the winning kingdom has to tame this land, so it's sending adventurers to explore it, to tame it, to conquer it, to find out what's inside it. And part of the reward is you get to carve out chunks of this land and make them your own little fiefdoms of the greater kingdom. Very British, very expansionist, very, oh, you've landed on this island, claim it, clear it out, and we'll let you keep a couple hectares of it for a while, anything. I mean, there are probably other ways to explain why you've come to the city, but that one's pretty good. And that one's very historically accurate. War's over. We've got this land. We don't know what's in this land. We're not going to invest energy exploring the land. Let's send a bunch of adventurers to explore the land and say that, you know, if you clear out a few thousand acres, you can say it's your fiefdom. We'll make you barons and we'll expect, you know, taxes. But, you know, at any point in time, we could reclaim it, much like the British Empire did. Yay, Crusades! So give them the reason to come to the city, give them a reason to explore the land, but you don't want the city so interesting that they spend all the time there. So now that we've got them in the city, now that we've got them in the thing, we know what the city's job is: resupply, heal them, provide them information they can't get on their own, replace characters that have died, introduce new players, you know, give a reason that if Susan can't make it this game, her character is in the city, and have a safe place to do whatever they do. And as the adventurers progress, what the city makes available to them will progress also to make it, you know, fair. I mean, if the whatever. But again, we don't want to spend all our time in the city. The second thing is the idea of zones. Now, obviously, the first zone, the zone around the city, is the relatively safest zone. There's going to be encounters there, but it's mostly going to be, you know, wild animals and maybe a few bandits, a couple low-level mooks, maybe a very small dungeon or two, but nothing really threatening. So it's, you know, because the city wouldn't be built around anything too threatening, this first zone is already pretty safe. And that's about a day's travel, you know. In any one direction, Zone 1 is about a day's travel. You could come to the end of Zone 1 and back to the city, and that's 1 day there, 1 day back, right? And this is the relatively safest zone. This is like the training zone. These are the boars and the goblins and the other minor things. And this zone, I mean, you could change out what's in this zone and occasionally have big threats come to the city to pass through this zone. But generally, Zone 1, the closest zone to the city, is going to be relatively easy. I mean, that's not to say that even, you know, a bunch of 16th level characters moving to this zone would get attacked by 200 goblins. That's still a threat, but generally. And as you get further out, each zone gets progressively more complicated, more harder, has its own story, has its own whatever going on, has its own tables of wandering monsters. Each zone can be a completely different biome. It doesn't have to make sense because it's D&D. You know, swamp, desert, why not? And each zone is slightly more dangerous than the last. I mean, not to say there aren't, like, you know, you could have like a little zone here that's relatively safe, and then bigger zones that are relatively more dangerous, and then, you know, another little oasis that's relatively safe, places to, you know, whatever, catch your breath. But generally, the farther you get away with the city, the more dangerous it's going to be. And generally also, you know, maybe if this is 1 day, the next zone is 2 days. 2 days there, 2 days across. And the zone after that is 3 days or whatever. You know, each zone takes longer to cross than the previous zone. Each zone is technically more dangerous than the previous zone. Each zone has its own stuff going on that either may or may not affect the other zones. You could have stuff going in this zone, and it has absolutely no effect on what's going on in this zone whatsoever. Or it could be affecting this zone. I mean, if there's a bunch of, you know, clam monsters lighting fires in this zone as one of the random encounters you've rolled, well, those fires might affect what's ever going on in this zone. Because, you know, fire. Or it might not. I don't know. It's up to you. You want a couple pre-built things. But you also want lots of random tables. Random tables are your big tool in this, because one of the incentives is that there's no plan. There's no, you have to go here, do this, come back, that's the adventure. This is just filled with possibilities and ideas. Some of those ideas you've thrown in, but the rest has to, you gotta leave vague. So if the players start showing interest in something, you can play off what they're showing interest in. But on the other hand, if they have no interest in the Tomb of the Dagger King whatsoever, you got to remember that name, then there's no reason for you to flesh it out. You know it's there. You put it on the map. You have a notebook with a few basic ideas, but you don't want to, fill a 37,000-page notebook with a Tomb of the Dagger King, and then they never go there, because then you're like, oh, fuck, I wasted all this time. Of course, you could still use it and just rename it, because suddenly they're all talking about, let's go to the Cavern of the Frost Witches. And you're like, I didn't make a Cavern of the Frost Witches, but I do have this. I'm just going to rename it. Got to remember that one, too. Cavern of Frost Witches. So you don't want to set anything in stone, just vague ideas for the ones you want to use. This is also a great way to use modules that you've got laying around that aren't really, major interconnected storylines, like, say, Storm King's Thunder. Great way to just toss in a one-shot module, like, Tomb of Horrors. It's over here in the swamp somewhere. Maybe they'll go there, maybe they won't. I won't there, it's there. Tomb of H. But the main thing that makes this work drive is random tables and listening to what the player characters. Because you could, talk about blah, 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 and then they'll hear something, whether you actually said it or not. And I've been in plenty of games where player characters have heard things that the DM did not say, and then they get hooked on doing that. And the DM's like, I, what are you talking about? I never said, but somehow in their mind, they've been like, ooh, that sounds interesting. Let's go check that out. So do you just shut them down, or do you run with it? It's like, okay, they want to go to the Cavern of the Frost Witches. I don't know what that is. I never said Cavern of the Frost Witches. I don't know where they got that idea from, but I'm going to run with it. And through random tables and talking to them and maybe using something else I've already written, because remember, you can move shit. If they don't go here and they're going here, just move this to here. You build the Hexcrawl. Each hex should have some random tables. Each hex should have something going on. Every one or two hexes should have something iconic that makes it stand out. The city should offer you rumors and vague information about what's going on, but generally this is terra incognito. This is all unexplored. This is all constantly changing. And this is all open for you, the DM, to fill in with wackiness, and all open for the players through their incentive and through their imagination and through what they get excited about to make the world better. If they start talking about that, coven of werewolves, you're like, okay, let's run with that. And 2 weeks later, they're like, yeah, no, I'm bored with werewolves. Let's go to the Tomb of the Dagger King. Then we're ready for that too. So there you go. There's some more ideas of how to run the Westmarch. Some stuff you need to design. Some stuff you can just leave vague. At the end, it's all about just exploration, fun, danger, the freedom to go whatever they want and risk entering into zones that they're not prepared for. There's no boundaries, there's no walls and doors. So if they want to wander into a, danger level 15 zone and they're only equipped to handle danger level 3, there's nothing stopping them. And it doesn't have to be sequential. This danger level 1 could be right next to a danger level 15 zone. This doesn't have to be sequential. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could be whatever way you want. You don't know. They don't know. Go with it. We'll talk more about this next week. Happy Valentine's Day. 14 minutes. Perfect place to stop it. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. You know the rest. I'll talk to you later. Yeah.